This video is documenting the prediction that the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald Ford U.S. aircraft carriers will be struck and sunk, destroyed, on May 23rd, 2026. The date that this video was posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Welcome. This video is predicting that a U.S. warship will be destroyed by Iran on May 23rd, 2026. All right. This email, as you can see, was composed on April 26th. The date that this video was posted also proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. And what I'm going to do right now, what I'm going to do in this video is explain to you the reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time. But this prediction has been known it doesn't really matter, obviously, because this prediction is such that it could be predicted the day before and it would still be a profound prediction. That would obviously be from God. There's no way around this prediction for the agnostic atheist. That said, this prediction has been known for quite a number of days prior to April 26th. In fact, this email that I'm going to read explaining some of the reasons for how this is known ahead of time is actually a copy-paste from another email that was composed on April 20th, which I'm going to switch over to. But the reason why I made a copy-paste of that original email is I didn't like the title. I wanted to change the title just for the record to make it more clear that this is a prediction. The other title is The Predicted Destruction of a U.S. Warship, but that's not quite the same as prediction : the destruction of a U.S. warship. Now, this email is documenting the prediction that Iran will sink a U.S. warship, perhaps the USS Abraham Lincoln, on May 23rd. The level of confidence that it will be the USS Abraham Lincoln has gone way up since the original email composed on April 20th. It is 6 days after that, and the signs in the meantime have really confirmed that it will be the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. It might not be. I'll be surprised if it isn't, though. I can't see how the USS Abraham isn't involved. If it isn't the USS Abraham that will be sunk, then it must be one of its protector ships, but I really don't see that. I really do see the USS Abraham Lincoln being the ship that God is pointing to here to be destroyed by Iran on specifically May 23rd. Now, the really, really hardcore fundamentalist agnostic atheist will say, well, the U.S. is at war. It is possible that a warship could get sunk. Poppycock, malarkey, nonsense. Furthermore, I'm predicting the specific date of this. So, although it would be really unreasonable, but then again, agnostic atheists aren't reasonable people. It isn't at all, not even slightly, a reasonable worldview. It's not even a matter of opinion. It's a fact. It is unreasonable worldview. These people are not reasonable, yet they make up the majority of the population in the West today. That said, if you would like to take that unreasonable position, that there's a chance that the U.S. warship could get sunk, well, fine, but I'm also saying specifically May 23rd. All right? And that'll be case closed. It doesn't even need to be the USS Abraham Lincoln. It will be case closed at that point. But it'll be all the more astonishing, as if it won't be astonishing enough, if it does in fact end up being the USS Abraham Lincoln, that it will be destroyed. It will be a turning point in American history. I am predicting the turning point in American history. This is extremely, extremely important. This prediction, this video channel that is from God. This prediction is from God, and the reasons that I'll be explaining will prove this. Because as you will see, as I will explain, you will clearly see that no human being is creative enough to have concocted these reasons in their own imagination. These reasons, some of them, but the ones that I will be explaining are only some of them, but these reasons that I'll be explaining in this video are clear and profound. There's no mistaking that they are, these reasons anyway, from God, and these reasons will be proven to be true and from God when this prediction comes to pass. And I know far more than anyone, like far more than anyone, the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove, one, the righteous Christian, I should repeat that, the righteous Christian God of the Bible, not the collective consciousness revolution, New Age God, not the impersonal energy God, whatever that is, and not the Muslim God. The righteous Christian God of the Bible. That said, there is already an overwhelming isn't even the right word, amount of evidence for the righteous Christian God of the Bible beyond this particular prediction. And so, that isn't really the purpose of this prediction. It is, but there's more. The reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God, and the reason for this video and video channel, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to prove all of the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video and the other videos on this channel. They are fact, they are true when this prediction comes to pass, and there is no debates regarding these controversial things that I'll be saying. That is the purpose of prophecy. And this is a prophecy. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of God proving it. Incidentally, it is how I came to faith. There was a time in my early 20s where the last thing I thought was true was the Bible. But I was really naive about a great many things at that point in my life. That said, that is the purpose of prophecy in the Bible. The disciples knew or recognized that Jesus was the Messiah through his fulfillment of prophecy. Revelation 19:10 in the Bible, quote, "The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy," unquote. That is at the end of the Bible. That is the essence of the Bible. Christianity is a prophetic tradition. Jesus commanded his disciples to watch for the signs, the prophetic signs of his return. Yet, if you were to ask the average so-called quote-unquote Christian to name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And they would miss even the obvious one in the Bible, the Star of Bethlehem, which was the sign for who? The wise men. Why were they wise? Because they were watching. They were watching for the signs of the birth of the Messiah and the signs of his first coming. Naturally, we can expect there to be signs of his second coming for the wise men that Jesus commanded to watch for these signs. And there have been thousands of them over the last number of years. The vast majority of which haven't been recognized by even those seeking to look at prophetic signs. Not necessarily their fault. They just don't. There's good reasons for why the vast majority of these signs have been missed. And I won't get into it. But they are only being explained on this channel. And this is how this prediction is known ahead of time, and why this prediction is not coming from any other channel. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. And the reason why I emphasize that is it's not about me at all. I could care less, personally. The reason for saying this is to emphasize that the purpose of this video and prediction is to prove to everyone the controversial things that I'll be saying. Which are only being said on this channel. At least with the level of conviction and certainty. Because these things that are controversial are demonstrated by God through the prophetic signs over and over again. And when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove that God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which demonstrates these controversial things, will be proven to be true. And therefore prove the truth regarding these controversial things. And with that said, with that introduction, let's get into these reasons for how it is known that a U.S. warship, most likely the USS Abraham Lincoln, I'm almost ready to say it will be the Abraham Lincoln, on May 23rd, 2026. All right, so now I've switched to the email that was composed on April 21st, as you can see here. It's the exact same email. And if you think I'm doing a bait and a switch, just think about it a little bit. It's still, the post date of the video is still April 26th, and the other email was April 26th. And the first line was the same line. This email is documenting the prediction that Iran will sink a U.S. warship, perhaps the USS Abraham Lincoln, on May 23rd. It's the exact same line that I just read in the April 26th email. So there's no bait and switch here. If you're not really thinking, because obviously you wouldn't be thinking very clearly at all if you thought something was fishy here. Okay? There's nothing fishy going on. Give me a break, right? This is April 21st. I just wanted to show you that this was known even before April 26th. I didn't really need to switch over. In fact, you know what? I'm going to switch back over. Why not? Because I know that there's ridiculous people out there. And so I'm just going to switch back to the April 26th email. But I just wanted to show you here that it has been known since April 21st, all of this information, but it doesn't even really matter because this prediction is not like other predictions. I mean, either the ship is going to get sunk on that date or it's not. And as long as the prediction's made prior to it, even if it's just 2 days prior to it, it's fine. All right, whatever. I'm back to the April 26th email. It's the exact same email, but just in case I've confused some people. So this email is documenting the prediction that Iran will sink a U.S. warship, perhaps the USS Abraham Lincoln, on May 23rd. I meditated on, so what I'm writing here, by the way, are just my notes. I don't have time to make a nice write-up. The nice write-up is my explanation. I'm going to explain things as I read from my notes. And these notes are largely written to my friends who are also up to date on these things that God is demonstrating through his science. So I meditated on things, and it occurred to me that there will be a destruction of a ship in the Persian Gulf or Strait of Hormuz as part of the escalation. Then I immediately thought to the near destruction of the World War II ship, the historic World War II ship in the fire at Pier 45 in San Francisco on May 23rd, 2020. A sign that has not been understood. Now it is. By the way, I remember when I first realized this, it was while I was headed into a town. So I remember where I was, and I remember that date. That was April 8th. So this prediction has been known in my mind since April 8th. Okay, so April 8th was actually the date that I first recognized this. I'm only just now getting around to making the video, but nonetheless, we still have almost a month left before the prediction, so it's not really that urgent. All right, so what I'm talking about here was this epic fire at Pier 45 in San Francisco in the harbor, the famous tourist area, and docked at one of the piers, Pier 45, is the historic World War II ship used in the invasion of Normandy. And from what I recall, it's the last one remaining. And so it's like a ship docked there that tourists can visit. But it almost burned in the epic fire in the warehouse on that pier. So it was threatened, but it was saved just in time. It was a prophetic sign from God. This threatening warning from God is what it was. And now, and only now, is this sign understood. This sign was pretty much shelved for 6 years. It has been attempted to be fit into the big picture of signs now and then since that time, but never really did fit and was largely forgotten. Of course, these things don't get really forgotten. The Holy Spirit then comes into my mind and reminds me of, if you could say anyway, that, a ship. Wait a second. There was that ship, that warship, Pier 45, warship Persian Gulf. Wait a second. And then, okay, so that gives us May 23rd, 2020. All right. Now it's a matter to confirm because this is how God works in his big picture of signs, these patterns of these dates, and it makes sense that God would have done this on this particular date to provide this date in the future, exactly 6 years later, May 23rd, 2026. Now it's just a matter of confirming through other prophetic signs and connections that this is the case. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on this principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And as I was explaining earlier, the vast majority of God's prophetic signs have been completely missed by even the community that claims to watch for prophetic signs. And one big reason for their missing all of the signs, and because signs are recognized from other signs and from other signs and from other signs, it's just a never-ending loop of signs confirming other signs and introducing new signs based on previous signs. And so once you start missing some of them, it's like snowballing for them, and they've missed all of them, pretty much. The vast majority of them. I mean, really, the vast majority of the prophetic signs are only being explained on this channel. And one way, the way that God does this, the way that God establishes these signs, is through these connections. In other words, what I'm saying is that none of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. This is what's missed by the other watchers. And it is through these connections that God reveals and can explain the proper, full intended meaning of the signs, which allows us to pick up and recognize other signs as they come, etc. So it's an interconnected web, and it's just like the Bible. The Bible is not a linear document. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible. It is all interconnected. That's the astounding thing about it that makes it the hand of God, how it is all interconnected. Well, that's the same with God's prophetic signs. It's all pattern. It's all interconnected. There's a saying, the Gentile, the Greek or whatever, thinks of prophecy in terms of prediction fulfillment, black and white. Whereas the Jew thinks of prophecy in terms of pattern. And it is pattern. And that's what's being explained on this channel through these connections that I'm explaining. So I just explained or attempted to explain one such example of how May 23rd, 26 was recognized as being the date for the ship through this pattern of this other ship that was threatened by fire in the prophetic city of San Francisco, and I'll explain that too, on this date 5/23. All right. Isaiah chapter 23 and Revelation chapter 8 are prophecies that describe the destruction of ships. So, and the profound thing, the profound discovery is that these prophecies of the destruction of ships are in fact symbolic of the destruction of America. So, most people that are interested in Bible prophecy will tell you that America is not found in Bible prophecy. This is definitely not true. And America is, in fact, prominent in Bible prophecy through what I'm about to explain. This is very, very important, all right? The destruction of ships in Bible prophecy, in Revelation chapter 8, is in fact symbolic of the destruction of America. That's how important this is. Isaiah chapter 23 is a prophecy about the ships of Tarshish. This prophecy is in context of a prophecy regarding ancient Tyre. So let's start with ancient Tyre. Ancient Tyre was a city on an island in the Mediterranean that was dominant in its time, and its success came came from its natural protection. It was surrounded by water. Invading armies could not reach it. Its natural protection was that its boundary was surrounded by water, ocean. It wasn't until Alexander the Great built a causeway, a bridge, from the mainland over to the island, that the island was finally conquered. And ancient Tyre was finally conquered. So, ancient Tyre is analogous to the natural protection that God gave America through the vast oceans that surround it. The Arctic Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, and Pacific Ocean. And the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. And God designed it this way. God also designed this natural protection for Great Britain, which God intentionally separated from the rest of Europe in order to create this unique culture that was different from the rest of Europe. A culture that God used ultimately to spread the gospel around the world. So God separated the UK to form this unique culture with its unique, extremely rich language, which was also used to spread the gospel around the world. The King James Bible, for example, is still today the most printed book in history. And the rich language that became English was the result of its of it being an island, for example. And its culture was unique from the rest of Europe. It was this culture that was a culture of individualism, which was required for the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and modern law and ultimately the culture that founded America. And the Constitution, the world's first modern constitution. And that wouldn't have ever have happened had it not been for the UK or Great Britain. And Great Britain's unique culture was a result of its isolation from the rest of Europe and also its protection, its natural safety from other tribes, from other invading armies. Okay. There's all kinds of evidence that supports the theory that in this context of the prophecy of ancient Tyre that references ancient Tarshish, there's all sorts of evidence that Tarshish is Great Britain. I'm not going to make this into anything more than that regarding the evidence for this. But it seems very clear, and it's very good evidence that this is the case. And this prophecy describes the ships of Tarshish. And also the daughter of Tarshish. The ships of Tarshish were what made it successful in the ancient world. So there's all sorts of evidence that, in fact, there was trade being conducted between Great Britain and the Mediterranean in the ancient world. And So the ships of, and so that would imply also the use of ships to conduct that trade. So from ancient times, Great Britain was reliant on its ships. We fast forward to the 19th century and the British Empire that encompassed the world on which the sun never set. That was a result of its ships, its merchant ships, and its navy. Great Britain's rise as the world dominant empire that dominated the world like no other empire has or had or has since was the result of its ships. And so to reference a location in terms of ships, as it is done in the Bible, is appropriate for Great Britain. And the Bible is authored, inspired by God, and so it does make sense that God would do this. The ships are what characterizes the power of Great Britain and the power of ancient Tarshish. This ancient Tarshish in this Bible prophecy in Isaiah chapter 23 had a daughter. Great Britain is, of course, known for having a daughter, America. The culture that God uniquely created, spawned, produced in the UK, produced America. They were at least the same culture. Arguably, they still are. Okay, so that's the daughter of Tarshish in prophecy, which aligns with this theory that ancient Tarshish is Great Britain, and these are metaphors for us to extrapolate to our current time. In other words, the prophecy written in Isaiah chapter 23 was meant for our time now. It isn't only about ancient Tarshish. It is about now. In fact, when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And it'll prove that I have the authority to say what I'm about to say, which is that God has proven or demonstrated through his signs that Tyre symbolizes America. There are signs to this effect. I won't explain them, but the Tylenol sign and the player for the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, these are, and the name of the assassin who shot Charlie Kirk, Tyler. These are all examples of God using symbolism to hint that ancient Tyre is in fact symbolic of America. And I explained at the beginning why that is. The parallels. God is speaking about the natural divine protection of God's Gentile nation that he designed from the beginning. And it doesn't only include its land surrounded by vast oceans. God has had his hand on America and protecting America from the beginning. America is an Israel. It is a chosen nation. It is God's Gentile nation. And God's communicating his hand on America and his protection for America through this metaphor of ancient Tyre. All right? Now, again, ancient Tyre is the prophecy that we have the mention of ancient Tarshish and the daughter of Tarshish. It all comes together. All of this is symbolic of America. Isaiah chapter 23. This is incidentally why the Antichrist wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. The basketball president. The 44th president, speaking of which, we have this parallel in Revelation chapter 4 plus 4. Revelation chapter 8. America is in Bible prophecy, and it is prominent in Bible prophecy, and it is about the destruction of ships. Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 through 9. The second angel blew his trumpet, as in trumpet. And something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Now, this isn't just about ships being destroyed. Like all of the book of Revelation, it's allegory, it's metaphor, it's symbolism. There's meaning, and like a lot of the book of Revelation, there are connections and ties to Old Testament prophecy. All right? I'm sure if you are familiar with the Bible and prophecy, you know this. If you're not, then this is the case, that a lot of prophecy in the book of Revelation is connected or a parallel or a mirror of prophecy in the Old Testament. And this is the case with a third of the ships being destroyed. This isn't just arbitrary language here. There's deep, important meaning. This is the second trumpet. And that all, what I just read, is all there is in this description of the second trumpet. And by the way, the second trumpet hints at the second term, second presidency for Trump. God's trumpet that he is using to trumpet his prophetic signs. And in this short description of this second trumpet, what do we make of it? What is going on here besides the great mountain burning with fire, being thrown into the sea? If you don't appreciate what I'm explaining here, that's all you have. I mean, so what if the sea becomes blood and a third of the living creatures died? This is allegory, right? This burning mountain, I doubt, will destroy a third of the creatures in the sea. It's all a metaphor. The important aspect of this, which isn't appreciated anywhere, if there's somewhere out there that also recognizes that the ships symbolize America, I'm not aware of that. And the reason why I'm confidently saying this is because I know this to be the case through God's prophetic signs. God has confirmed what I am saying through his prophetic signs. It took a long time to get this confident into what I'm saying. There's no doubt, zero, absolutely zero. And this was learned before it was learned that these U.S. aircraft carriers are about to be destroyed. In fact, I began this video without knowing that there will be 2 U.S. aircraft carriers that will be destroyed on May 23rd. And so I need to update the beginning, perhaps. The ships. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there will be a third ship that will be destroyed on May 23rd, or at some point. But anyway, the beginning, if you will, or rather, a symbolic beginning of the end, and a huge turning point in this destruction of America that's prophesied in Isaiah chapter 23 and Revelation chapter 8 will be what I am prophesying in this video. The destruction of American warships. That is what is being described in Revelation chapter 8. It's part of this pattern. The ships in the coming destruction of the ships in themselves will be more signs, more symbolism for the destruction of America. In other words, the destruction of America, of course, isn't just the destruction that's being predicted of these warships, these U.S. aircraft carriers. The destruction of these ships will in themselves be more symbolism of this unfolding destruction of America that's prophesied in this second trumpet, as in the second presidency of Trump, who has brought these ships into danger where they will be destroyed. And the blood, there will be blood in the sea. U.S. blood. All right, so back to what I was saying here. We have Isaiah 23 and Revelation chapter 8 speaking of the destruction of ships, which is, as I have now explained, the destruction, symbolic of the destruction of America. A minute ago, I mentioned that God's signs prove this. This is why, for example, the extremely prophetic earthquake that occurred in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, the strongest earthquake east of the Mississippi in I forget how many years. An earthquake that was felt by 1/3 of the U.S. population. It occurred on the date 8/23 in the symbolic capital of the nation of America. We have this allusion to the destruction of America through Isaiah chapter 23 and Revelation 8, which is why the earthquake occurred on the date 8/23. On 8/23 in 2011, Washington, D.C., America's capital, earthquake. Okay, and then from that date, and by the way, before I move on, it did a lot of damage to the National Cathedral, nicknamed America's spiritual home. It was symbolic of America's relationship with God. God was pointing to his relationship with America in similar fashion that God did so throughout the Bible, communicate his relationship with ancient Israel. And that's why the nation's spiritual home, the National Cathedral, suffered $34 million in damages. It suffered $34 million in damages because, well, 34 is the 9th Fibonacci number. the Fibonacci sequence is found throughout the natural world, God's creation. The number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. 34, though, is also 2 times 17. The flood judgment, which is what this earthquake was, a warning of judgment. The flood judgment began on the date 217. That's why we have the number 34 in the 9/11 judgment warning. On 9/11, 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart. There were 2 space shuttle disasters almost exactly 17 years apart. Literally, they are just a couple of days apart on the calendar, and they are commemorated on the same date every year. And incidentally, the reason why the 2 planes were 17 minutes apart on 9/11 and the 2 space shuttle disasters were 17 years apart is because this pointed to Apollo 17, the last time that an American was on the moon. America's departure from the moon, well, first, the moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. The sun is symbolic of God the Father, and its light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. Which is why watching for the timing of the moon is important in the Bible, and it is symbolic of watching for the timing of the Lord's return through such things as moon signs. But Apollo 17 was the last time that an American stepped off of the moon, departed the moon, which was symbolic of America's departure from Christ. And I'll just leave it there because I could just go on and off onto tangents. And the thing about God's big picture of signs is that it is an interconnected web, and it is extremely difficult to explain because it is 3-dimensional, and also when you try to explain one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. Because one thing requires these second and third witnesses, which in turn, those second and third witnesses each require second and third witnesses each, and same with those second and third witnesses to confirm the matter, and on, which is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And I'm just going through some of the second and third witnesses to confirm the matter for you right here, including the prophetic significance of the earthquake, to confirm for you that this date 823 is confirmation of Isaiah chapter 23 and Revelation 8. You see how it just goes on and on with these second and third witnesses on layers upon layers upon layers. So the 34 million, back to that. Well, on 9/11 there was the 34 too, because not only the 2 planes were 17 minutes apart, which is 2 times 17 equals 34, but also on 9/11, the Dow was closed at 9,605, which hints at 9/11 because 6 plus 5 equals 11. And there were 56 passengers on the plane, the second one. And so 9/11 was in the number of the Dow that was frozen at where it had been closed from the prior day because it didn't open that day. And that close was 0.34 points difference from the prior close on the Friday, which is rare. It means besides the decimal point, the Dow was unchanged at 9,605. But it was a 0.34 difference because the 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart. Okay, so anyway, we have the 9th Fibonacci number of dollars, $1 million, in the destruction to the National Cathedral. And then from that, it is exactly 9 months to this date, May 23rd, 2012. Now, 9 months in itself is also prophetic. It isn't. Oh, and by the way, to confirm to provide second and third witnesses to confirm matters for us in his big picture of signs, he pairs often certain numbers together. And I know the numbers, which ones they are, because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 8 years. But 9 pairs with 9. So the 9th Fibonacci $1 million destruction pairs with the 9 months, and 9 pairs with 44, because the 44th president was inaugurated in 09. And to those who say, I have so much disappointment in what I'm about to say, but for those evangelical Christians that claim that the identity of the Antichrist is not knowable, the foundation of God's true big picture of patterns and of connections and patterns and signs is identifying the Antichrists. The building blocks of his signs, including, for example, the pairings of 9 and 44 and 23, as I'm about to explain. These are the numbers. And it is unfortunate that the Christians play this Antichrist guessing game, which they love to play. They really love to play the Antichrist guessing game. Because they do it because, well, one thing, it is a lack of faith. It is obvious who they are, but they don't have the eyes to see because they don't have the faith, which is why they partly don't believe that it's possible to know. They don't have that level of faith, first of all. Second of all, it's rooted in their heretical interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The reason why I call it heretical is because it is their salvation doctrine, their soteriology, that has them misinterpret 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which has them interpret the thing holding back the Antichrist that Paul describes as being a he and a what, as being the Holy Spirit. But why in the world would Paul refer to the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? But furthermore, why would he speak cryptically? And at the beginning of the letter, tell the Thessalonians that they knew what he is talking about. Why not just speak plainly, especially since they already know? Why would he use this cryptic language? Well, the answer is because had anyone in possession of this letter would have been in great danger, because he was referring to, in terms of the he and the what, holding back the Antichrist, which was a prophecy, which has already been fulfilled, as being Constantinople, or Constantine, I should say, moving the capital from Rome to Constantinople. The he and the what being removed out of the way, which there then led to the rise in power of the bishops of Rome, leading to the first of the two antichrists, who incidentally is Pope Francis. You'll say, well, he's dead. How can he be the Antichrist? He will be resurrected from the dead through demonic power in May of 2029, specifically on May 2nd. Anyway, okay, so what we have here also in 9 months, it's prophetic also because when asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, in the context of he mentioned earthquake signs and also used the metaphor of birth pains. The average human gestation period is 9 months. Furthermore, this 9 months birth pains connection connects from arguably the most important earthquake. So 9 months exactly from the Washington, D.C. earthquake to this destruction of a U.S. submarine, which was the which was the 44th Los Angeles class submarine, and the massive fire that destroyed the submarine was in the 23rd state, Maine. From what I recall, it was in Portland, which would be more allusion to ships. Ports are used by ships, but nonetheless, it was a ship. Anyway, 9 pairs with 44, like I said, but also 23. Because the 44th president, who was inaugurated in 09, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23. But then this gets us back to Isaiah chapter 23 and the daughter of Tarshish, which is America. The daughter of Tarshish being the daughter of Tarshish, referenced in terms of the ships of Tarshish, and also a prophecy regarding destruction, like Revelation chapter 8 and its description of the destruction of ships. This destruction of a ship connected with 9 months to the earthquake. And again, Jesus referenced earthquake signs in context of birth pains, 9 months. Now, we have another pairing. See, this is how the building blocks of God's signs works. We have the 23rd state ship, 44th Los Angeles class. Los Angeles, incidentally, hints at fallen angels. And the 9 months. But we have another 4 plus 4 years, giving us a 44, to exactly May 23rd, 2020, which is what I had spoken about earlier, which was another ship sign. And it was another fire. Just like this fire, exactly 4 plus 4 years earlier with the 44th Los Angeles class submarine. Okay? This was the fire on Pier 45. The fire began at 4:15 a.m., which in itself hinted at 45. And the 45th trumpet. Or I should say the 45th president. God's trumpet. 45 is the 9th triangular number. In a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. Okay, by the way, also it's the 23rd of the month. That's another pairing of 23 and 44, with the 4 plus years between these two 23rds of the month. So what happened was this fire in the warehouse on Pier 45 threatened to burn the ship that was docked there, which was a historic World War II ship. This was in San Francisco, Pier 45 in San Francisco. The ship was saved by the fireboat named St. Francis. Speaking of earthquakes, the World Series earthquake in 1989 in the area code 415, which is why the fire started at 4:15 a.m. in the area code 415. That earthquake was exactly 415 months before the prophetic Pope Francis sign on May 17th, 2024, in which he gave himself the sole authority to declare supernatural phenomena, which is what the Pope will do in the end times. Once he is resurrected from the dead through supernatural phenomena. Now, anyway, so this World War II ship is one of 3 remaining ships that were involved in the invasion of Normandy in World War II, and it attended the 50th anniversary. 50 is 25 times 2, which is at 2,520, which is the number of days that symbolizes the end times. This is an end times ship. World War II ended with nuclear bombs, and the destruction of these warships that's being predicted in this video will come about through the attempt to extract uranium from Iran that would otherwise be used to create nuclear bombs, which could be put onto a ship and sailed into a U.S. harbor to destroy a city. Now, so the ship's name, the ship that was threatened until it was saved by the St. Francis Fire Department ship in San Francisco, as in Pope Francis, all right? This ship's name was the SS Jeremiah. The SS Jeremiah O'Brien. And that hints at prophecy in the book of Jeremiah regarding the destruction of Iran. Okay, so we have the ship saved by the St. Francis fireboat in San Francisco from a fire that began at 4:15 a.m. on Pier 45 in the area code 415. Anyway, San Francisco hits at Pope Francis, and Pope Francis was the 266th Pope and is the Antichrist, and the Antichrist's number in Bible prophecy is 666. That's why it is exactly 2 times 6 times 6 months, which is also exactly 66 plus 6 months from this San Francisco World War II ship fire to May 23rd, 2026, which is the predicted date of the fires on these U.S. aircraft carriers and their destruction. Okay. And so these are just notes, right? Like I mentioned, I'm just writing the insights as they come. So May 23rd, 2012 and May 23rd, 2020, the fire on the submarine in the 23rd state and the fire at Pier 45 that threatened the ship. Okay, these signs don't make sense without these connections. In other words, we know that these are prophetic signs, but they don't really fit into any sort of sensical purpose without this, without May 23rd, 2026, and this prediction. And this makes all the sense in the world because it's San Francisco, and the ship was saved by the St. Francis fireboat. And Pope Francis was the 266th Pope. This is astounding beyond words. 2 times 6 times 6 months exactly from the Pier 45 in San Francisco and the St. Francis fireboat that saved the ship. Warship. Right? These are all warships signs. And they date back to this date 823, which is an allusion to the destruction of ships in Bible prophecy. Okay, so also this is why the DC quake was on 823. We know that 8 and 23 hint at ships. And this connects the nation's capital quake on 823 to ships. In other words, this is all confirmation of the fact that Isaiah 23 and Revelation chapter 8 are about the destruction of ships which symbolize America. And its symbolic destruction will come through these symbolism for this destruction will be symbolized with this prediction for this destruction of these warships on May 23rd, 2026. Therefore, this is huge. This couldn't be more huge. If it's not apparent already, if you are a quote-unquote Christian, make sure that you never ever stop sharing this video. And I mean that, literally. No, don't ever stop sharing this video or some other video on this channel. Nothing compares to this in terms of an evangelical tool. Nothing compares to this. It is a massive bag of gold, and Jesus warned those Christians that did nothing with their bag of gold that they would be banished to hell. Oh yeah, I forgot to elaborate. The reason for the false interpretation of the Holy Spirit is related to the evangelical false doctrine of once saved, always saved, which is refuted by, for one thing, the parable of the bags of gold. And don't say that it isn't, because it's in context. It's for believers. It's in context of Matthew 25. And it follows directly the parable of the bridesmaids, which is about the rapture. And don't listen to those evangelicals that will say, well, it's not about the rapture. It is about the rapture. The 5 virgins, and there were Christians left behind. No, not all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. And if they're left behind, it doesn't mean that they're not a quote-unquote Christian, because what does that even mean anyway? It doesn't mean what evangelicals think, the majority of them, that's for sure. Their theology is so messed up in so many ways. And that would be what would be expected. You can't expect one version of Christianity to have the truth. They're all deceived by Satan in their own way, in their own unique way. I mean, the Catholics are, of course, well deceived. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are well deceived, but what? Evangelicals aren't? No, of course they are. They're deceived in a really deceitful way through intellectualism, which is why in their worldview, one is saved through holding the correct intellectual agreement with the correct doctrine. If you believe the precise correct doctrine, Calvinism, then you're saved. It's absurd. And, well, I don't even want to use an adjective. So let's move on. So, in other words, so the Strait of Hormuz is said to be 104 miles. 104 is 2 times 52, which hints at this number I mentioned earlier as being symbolic of the number of days for the end times. And that's only symbolism incidentally. For those that are looking for a specific, precise beginning to this, you can stop looking. And again, the reason why God has given me a voice to this prediction is to prove the controversial things that I am saying, including everything that I have said incidentally regarding the ability, first of all, to identify the Antichrist, but also the interpretations and the doctrine behind the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that prevents them and has them play the Antichrist guessing game. Anyway, it is only symbolism, and we are well inside the beginning of the 2,520 days. And it's case closed. There's no debate. Zero. Once this prediction comes to pass regarding these things, and I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. It is to prove these things. Time is short. We don't have time to debate these, in my opinion, silly debates. Sorry to call them silly, but they kind of are. These things, like the Holy Spirit being the he and the what, when it's clear. Okay, I just explained it, anyway, you get my point. So we are inside the 2,520 days. So you can stop wasting time looking for that, and you can stop wasting time looking for the identity of the Antichrist now. If you continue to do so, you do not appreciate the purpose of this prediction that is from God and video channel. You are wasting your time. You might as well turn off this video now. Go back to playing the Antichrist guessing game, getting out the formulas for the beginning of the 2,520 days. Go back to doing that. Stop watching this video. By the way, I just came upon something, and I should add it here, because a minute ago I talked about the Apollo missions and the 2 space shuttle disasters. Well, there were 135 space shuttle missions. And prior to the Iran war, there were on average 135 ships going through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. And of course, the space shuttles were ships. Spaceships. Yeah, all right. It is exactly 2 times 52 weeks between the solar eclipse over Eagle Pass and the solar eclipse from space, when the astronauts flew over the dark side of the moon where the Eagle has landed. Okay, so when the Apollo 11 lunar module landed, it was said to the world, the Eagle has landed. One of the most famous phrases in history, the Eagle has landed. Okay, the astronauts on this recent space journey to the moon, the first time being back to the moon since the departure from the moon in the Apollo 17 mission, which is again why the space shuttle disasters were 17 years apart, as I explained. They flew by the moon exactly 2 times 52 weeks after the solar eclipse that was a warning of judgment for America that first entered America over Eagle Pass in Texas. Okay? And it was said, quote, when the astronauts went by the moon just now, it was said, quote, a solar eclipse from space. I guess when you go behind the dark side of the moon, it's like an eclipse. So anyway, but it connects to the eclipse over America, over Eagle Pass, which hints at the moon because of the Eagle having landed. The location of the disaster in Operation Eagle Claw was chosen because it was moon-like. So Operation Eagle Claw was the attempt to extract the hostages from Tehran, the U.S. hostages in the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. It was the 4 times 4th prime number of hostages. And Operation Eagle Claw, which incorporated 4+4 helicopters that were lost, was aborted. This was an attempt to rescue the hostages. It was aborted, and 4+4 military personnel were killed and 4 were injured. And where they landed on the moon-like landscape in the desert of Iran, they had to stop a civilian bus which had 44 Iranians on it. Okay, and the site was chosen for its moon-like landscape, but what they discovered when they arrived, which was a surprise for them, which is that the area had been recently covered in ankle-deep dust. And so when the helicopters landed at the rendezvous point in the mission before going into Tehran, they had 0 visibility. Just like when the Eagle lunar module of Apollo 11 landed on the moon, it had 0 visibility because of the moon dust. All of this and the attempt to extract the hostages is a prophecy and a pattern pointing to the coming attempt to extract the nuclear dust from Iran. That's why all of these connections to the moon, including the eclipse over Eagle Pass, you see how amazing all of this is. Now, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this video, obviously, none of this could have been created in the imagination of a human being. And the prediction when it comes to pass will prove this. So, the Strait of Hormuz is 2 times 52 miles. I forgot to mention it here, but when they were cruising by the moon, the astronauts were 252,000 miles away from Earth, which hinted at the Strait of Hormuz, which is 2 times 52 miles. Now, this implies that the coming disaster for a U.S. warship will be on the Strait of Hormuz on the date 5/23. May 23rd will be 47 days after the astronauts were on the dark side of the moon. 47 in God's signs is symbolic of Iran because the Islamic regime in Iran has been in power for 47 years, and they will be destroyed during the 47th presidency of President Trump. All right, now, this is all amazing, right? Now, the Iranian Revolution lasted for 1 year, 1 month, and 4 days. All right, from the beginning to when the Ayatollah took power, 1 year, 1 month, 4 days. April 14th, 2026 is 114 years after the Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. So I don't know what to do here because I spend these days the majority of the day just catching up and writing down, documenting the signs and connections and what God is communicating on a daily basis. And there's just no time. It's taking too long to go through this information. Like just this is just like an example. This would have been accumulated, I don't know. At the pace that I'm going right now, though, it's taking too long. And I don't even know how it can be explained any faster, but I'm going to try. And so anyway, we know that Mel Gibson, and to go faster, I'm going to have to just not explain too many details. But it's through the details that all of the information is confirmed. And it really does require these explanations to understand the significance of these things that are written down here. Well, anyway, Mel Gibson is prophetic. Why? See, I have to explain. Mel Gibson, for example, produced and directed the movie The Passion about Christ. Well, it would make sense if Mad Max is prophetic because, well, Mad Max is an apocalyptic movie that began Gibson's career. And the plot of Mad Max is the shortage of gas. And so Australia is going through a shortage, like a threat of a shortage of gas, unlike other countries. And so that's pointing to Mad Max. That's designed by God. The reason why Mad Max is an Australian movie is precisely this. Australia is one of the most vulnerable countries to this oil shortage, which is its judgment on Australia, because it wasn't just only America that God set apart and used in the 19th and 20th centuries to spread the gospel around the world. He used the English-speaking countries. They were also, if you will, daughters of Tarshish. And as a result, in line with God's principle, judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and blessings the nation received. end times judgment is primarily for America. That's why, people ask, well, why are you always so focused on prophetic signs in America? Well, the answer, obviously, is that because God is. And the reason for that is because if you didn't know, America is God's Gentile nation. But it does also apply to the other English-speaking countries. They're in a similar boat. They're in a similar ship, if you will. See, I'm going off again, but I have to. I have to explain these things. So Australia, this is, for example, the reason why Australia experienced the highest level of madness. Speaking of Mad Max, Australia went truly mad during the CVD epidemic, so-called. The judgment is the worst countries in the world were the English-speaking countries during the CVD disease. The madness was worst in these countries because they have not only turned from God, but they have gone so far from God, they are like in rebellion. The left, the political left in these countries and in the blue states in America have lost the plot so far. They are in complete rebellion against God. They don't know it. But a manifestation of it was the madness and the totalitarianism that Australia experienced during the CVD disease hysteria. They went mad. But Mad Max, okay, so God is using names with the letter X in them to hint at the mark of the Antichrist, because the letter X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. I'm not going to explain that. Okay, and the mark of the Antichrist is the VACCINE, which is Australia, for example, in its madness during the CVD disease era. Okay, and but the people that do take the mark of the Antichrist, the SHOTs, will become mad because it will facilitate, or it's leading to, demonic possession. When the bottomless pit is opened in Revelation chapter 9, which follows the destruction of ships in Revelation chapter 8, incidentally, when this bottomless pit is opened and the demons emerge, they will demonically possess the people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And they will go mad. It'll be a zombie pandemic. There is obviously already evil, spiritual evil, and demonic influence in the political left. This is just symbolism for when the bottomless pit is opened. I mean, for those that don't understand the nature of what is behind, or what is the root of the Trump derangement syndrome, it's because it can't be understood without a spiritual perspective. Trump derangement syndrome is rooted in their rebellion against God. Of course, for most of them, it's unconscious. They don't even believe in a God. But you can't explain it. It's not rational. It's spiritual. Okay? All right. You see, what did I spend? Like 7 minutes just explaining this one sentence here. We're not going to finish this. So Mad Max gives us MM, the 13th letter. 13 symbolizes Iran. 2 M's, 2 13th days of the months that the Jews were persecuted in the book of Esther. The original movie premiered in Australia on this date. Trumpet announced a U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz on the same date, April 12th, exactly 47 years after the release of Mad Max. Again, 47, specifically 47 years, is symbolic of the Islamic Iranian regime that has been in power for 47 years. In other words, the Mad Max movie was released shortly after the regime came to power. And Mad Max is about the shortage of oil, and so is the Islamic regime. If I didn't mention it in this video already, obviously, God designed the geography of the Middle East. How can it be that the world is dependent on this supply of oil that's trapped inside the Persian Gulf beyond the Strait of Hormuz that Iran is able to control? It was all obviously. In my opinion, even a fool should be able to recognize this. This isn't a coincidence. It's designed for the end times, the Strait of Hormuz. Okay? So, Iran's about the shortage of oil, and it always has been about this upcoming shortage of oil, which is what the movie Mad Max is about, which is why it was released right after the Islamic regime came to power. Now, there's more to it, though. This is stunning confirmation that this war is leading to oil and food shortages because oil is related to food. The farmers rely on oil for their fertilizers. And which is hinted at with the movie Mad Max. Stunning confirmation. So in other words, Mad Max is a prophecy. Because Mel Gibson himself is a prophecy. God is using Mel Gibson, like he uses Trump and other men in his signs. So, Mad Max is a prophecy. Mad Max is an allusion to what is coming. Now, Mad Max was released in the US on March 21st, which is 3 sets of 7, right? 21 divided by 3, 777. 3 sets of 7. Book of Joshua in the Bible, enacted symbolically before the walls of security collapsed. The 3 sets of 7 included the blowing of trumpets, which is why Trump. Donald Trump, the name is equal to 138 in simple English gematria, equals 1, b equals 2, c equals 3. And 138 days after the release of Mad Max in the US was this US-Iran date, the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis at the US Embassy in Tehran. That's amazing because of this Donald Trump connection here. And it's US. Donald Trump, of course, leads the US right now in this campaign against Iran. Now, the April 12th, 1979 release of the movie Mad Max was 126.0%, which hints at the 1,260 days mentioned in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist. Okay, 126.0% of a year, which is also 460 days before the first day of the revolution on January 7th, 1978. Or is after, I should say. So again, Mad Max is symbolic of the Islamic Revolution and the coming oil shortage and shortage of food. 460 because 46 is the 4 times 4th semi-prime number. And that's relevant because of the book of Jeremiah that describes the destruction of the Islamic regime coming by 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven. Okay? It's allegory. Which is why we have this 44 everywhere, including the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. And like I mentioned earlier, the extraction of the 4 times 4th prime number of hostages in the Operation Eagle Claw that saw 4+4 helicopters and 4+4 military personnel lost. Okay, and on and on. And also the 44th president, the Antichrist, the second of the 2 Antichrists. Now, the U.S. release of Mad Max was 404 days after the first day of the Islamic regime on February 11th, 1979, when Khomeini took power. That's a 44 for you. Again, related to Iran because of Jeremiah and the four winds from the four quarters of heaven that will destroy Iran. The first day of Trump's second presidency was 404 days to the day that Khomeini was killed. Khomeini replaced Khomeini. All right? The second Ayatollah, second presidency of Trump, that first day of the war and the killing of Khomeini was 404 days after Trump took power. Khomeini took power 404 days before the release of Mad Max in the US. Do you see? 4 and 4 equals Iran, like I've said. By the way, the US, founded in 1776. 1776 is 4 times 444. It's all meant to be. This is the end of America. Iran is the end of America. From the beginning of America. 4 winds from the four quarters of heaven. 444-day Iran hostage crisis. I think this 404 days parallel is a second witness that confirms that Mad Max is prophetic. It is prophetic. Mad Max is what is coming. In fact, I believe this 404 days parallel is the reason why the two leaders' names are nearly identical. The name rhymes for the purpose of confirming the 404 days rhyme, right? It's a rhyme. 404 days rhymes, and the two names rhyme. But that's why they rhyme. What a coincidence, right? Both Khomeinis, but they're spelled differently. They're not even related to each other. It's not like everyone in Iran has the same name, Khomeini, spelled different ways. It's a coincidence designed by God. But why is this coincidence designed by God? It's to confirm what I have just said. Exactly this. If you ever wondered why the coincidence of the two Khomeinis, it's this, right here. This 404 days connection between both Khomeinis. Power was removed from Khomeini after 404 days, and Khomeini took power 404 days before Mad Max. The Ayatollahs are mad, of course. They are mad men. But also Mad Max is a prophecy for what is coming to America. Oil shortages for the world. And food shortages. All right. Now, in fact, okay, so I just said this, the rhyming aspect of this, it's amazing. The symbolic beginning of Khomeini's rule and the symbolic end of Khomeini's rule. God and the symbolic beginning of Trump's rule. God uses records, for prophetic signs in general. Mad Max set a Guinness record for most profitable film at the time. Okay, what began the revolution? 4 terrorists set a movie theater, as in Mad Max, on fire, killing about 400 people. It is said to have triggered the revolution. 4 terrorists, 400 deaths began the revolution with fire. God will end the revolution with 4 winds, as in fire, from the 4 quarters of heaven, as described in Bible prophecy. That's amazing. Which further confirms that it is in fact what's going on here with this patterns of 44, and the revolution beginning with the pattern of 44 and ending, therefore, with this pattern of 44 in the Bible prophecy. 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven. Jeremiah chapter 49. Now, there's a lot going on here, which I'm not going to explain fully. But anyway, and there was this basketball sign involving this player named Bam, as in bomb, as in explosion. He plays for the Heat, and he fell. He was tripped, okay? And it was 4.7 seconds remaining in the overtime when he scored the winning basket with the guy who tripped Bam. Bam left the game with an injury, all right? And 47 is equal to Iran and the 47th president. Now, this occurred on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic sank, by the way, exactly 47 years after the death of Abraham Lincoln, which is evidence, or rather a clue, that it will be the USS Abraham Lincoln that will be destroyed and sunk like the Titanic was. In fact, aircraft carrier is like a Titanic. It is the largest ship, U.S. warship, okay? And thought to be unsinkable, like the Titanic. Whoa, right? Now, the player's number who fell, he's prophetic for other reasons, okay, which I can't get into. Now, because we already know he's prophetic, all right? He's number 13, and he fell, he was tripped, 13 plus 13 plus, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The number 13 symbolizes Iran, right? The Jews were persecuted in ancient Persia on the 13th days of the month. Okay, 13 plus 13 plus 13 days before the destruction of the U.S. warship, the Abraham Lincoln, which is why the Titanic was sunk on the 47th anniversary of the death of Abraham Lincoln, who was shot. The USS Abraham Lincoln will be shot by a missile. Now, the pride of the Russian fleet, the Moskva, another unthinkable, or rather unsinkable ship, was sunk on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. And now we know why. It was all to point to the unsinkable U.S. pride of the U.S. fleet, the aircraft carrier. Now, it was sunk exactly 1,500 days before the predicted sinking of the U.S. Abraham Lincoln. The 15th prime number is 47, which equals Iran. And again, Abraham Lincoln died 47 years before the sinking of the Titanic, and Bam fell on the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic and on the anniversary of the death of Abraham Lincoln. Well, no, not exactly, because the Titanic was struck the iceberg on the 14th and sunk on the 15th. Another 1,500 reason for the 1,500 days connection. Anyway, so that's that, okay? Let's just move on. All right. So this is an amazing story here. On May 17th, 2025, the Mexican warship hit the Brooklyn Bridge. This old sailing ship. It's not a modern ship, but it's a warship used by the Mexican Navy. The Mexican Navy warship hit the Brooklyn Bridge on May 17th, 2025. And the 110th mayor spoke at 9 p.m. God pairs 9 and 110 to point to 9/11. I'm not going to explain that any more than that. And he pairs 9 with 44. And that's relevant because this date is the 4 times 4th prime number of weeks, 53 weeks. There was 53 hostages in Iran. The 4 times 4th prime number of weeks to May 23rd, and the predicted sinking of the U.S. warship. And again, this Mexican warship hit the Brooklyn Bridge in the U.S. 9/11 was the warning of judgment. The judgment is the destruction of the U.S. warship, which will change history. Now, the name of the ship is this Aztec name. I think it's Aztec. But it means, in the native language, descending eagle. Descending eagle, as in Operation Eagle Claw, when the helicopters descended on the moon-like landscape because of the descending of the Eagle lunar module when the Eagle had landed on the moon. The name of the Mexican warship fits this pattern, in other words, of God's signs connecting the moon to moon dust to nuclear dust in Iran, like I explained. And we included in this the eclipse over Eagle Pass, for example, which is on the border with Mexico. The name of this Mexican warship, that just came to me, by the way. That happens all the time. So the name of the Mexican warship is Descending Eagle, which hints at Operation Eagle Claw, which hints at Iran. Which is why we have this exact profound connection here. Because again, Iran is 44. 4 winds from the four quarters of heaven. Okay, and on May 23rd, Iran is predicted to destroy the U.S. warship. Plural, actually. I now believe it'll be the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald Ford. So that's why the connection is relevant. It's also 1 year and 26 days, which hints at Bible prophecy of 1,260 days. This is why Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash on the date 1/26 in 2020. His pilot that crashed the helicopter was from Azerbaijan. I think it's quite possible that U.S. troops will enter Iran through Azerbaijan. I'm not 100% on that one. Could be that's why the pilot was from Azerbaijan. Also, the president of Iran, on the date 5/17 in 2024, died in a helicopter crash at the border of Azerbaijan. All right, now, anyway, the day that Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash, which ultimately points to Iran, because Kobe Bryant, by the way, was born on the date 8/23, which hints at ships, like I explained earlier. Bryant wore number 8, and Jordan wore number 23, another 8/23. Well, also, by the way, Bryant wore 24, and Jordan wore 9. So 8 and 9, 23 and 24. That's another pattern. It's another pattern that confirms the significance of Jordan wearing 23 and Bryant wearing 8. Now, why is Jordan important? Well, I got to cut it off. I can't just keep going and going, right? Now, so anyway, that's why 2,309 days, because God pairs 9 and 23 together, like I explained. And that's relevant to Kobe Bryant because he's basketball, and so is Jordan, who wore number 9 and 23. Again, the basketball president who wore 23 was inaugurated in 2009. The 44th president. Now, player number 13, who passed Bryant, that was the other thing that I was alluding to earlier, why this number 13 player who was tripped was important is because this was shortly after he was the biggest news story in the NBA because he scored 83 points in a game, which, by the way, is the 23rd prime number. Speaking of ships in Isaiah chapter 23, he passed Bryant's record when Bryant scored 81 points. So now, whoa. So this guy, Bam, number 13, which hints at Iran, but also hints at America, founded on 13 colonies. He was taken out, he was tripped by a hornet, a stinger, which is symbolic of a missile or a drone. See, when I wrote this, I didn't even know that it would be a missile, but I do believe it'll be a missile. So that's why he was tripped by the Hornet, the team named Hornets, as in stingers in Revelation chapter 9, following the destruction of ships in Revelation chapter 8. But it's symbolic of a missile that will sting the U.S. warship. All right? And this is amazing. The guy passed Bryant's record because it pointed to Bryant, who died in a helicopter crash. Which gets us to Operation Eagle Claw and the helicopters that crashed in Iran, which is why his pilot was from Azerbaijan. But also, this is why Kobe Bryant was charged with rape in Eagle, Colorado. Eagle, Colorado, the abbreviation for Colorado is CO. Eagle, comma, CO. Okay? CO hints at Operation Claw. Eagle CO hints at Operation Eagle Claw. Bryant died in a helicopter crash in an Operation Eagle Claw was all about the failure of the helicopters that crashed. Okay? Now, the guy, Bam, was tripped by a Hornet as a missile, and it was Bam because he passed Bryant, which pointed to Operation Eagle Claw in Iran. Furthermore, Bam is number 13, which hints at Iran, and he was tripped 13 plus 13 plus 13 days before the predicted destruction of the U.S. warship, which will be destroyed during America's attempt to extract the nuclear dust, which is a parallel or a mirror of the attempt in Operation Eagle Claw to extract the hostages. Yeah. Now, 13 plus 13 plus 13 is 39. The 39th president was the president during Operation Eagle Claw. He was the one that called for the abortion of the mission. By the way, that's also prophetic because the last American on the moon was exactly 144 weeks after abortions were legalized in the first state. Yeah. Anyway, the 39th president was the president for Operation Eagle Claw, and he made the final decision to abort the mission. And at his inaugural ball, Paul Simon sang his hit song American Tune, which includes in the lyrics Apollo 11. Jimmy Carter made his important statement on the 9th anniversary of Apollo 11 landing on the moon, as in 9/11, as in Revelation 9/11, which describes King Apollyon, as in Apollo missions. The 9th anniversary of Apollo 11 hints at King Apollyon in Revelation 9/11, King Apollyon being a name for Satan, and Simon sang about Apollo 11 to Carter and the inaugural ball on the date 119, which hints at Revelation 9/11. Simon sang about Apollo 11 9 days before Stephen King, as in King Apollyon, published his book, The Shining. Paul Simon also went on to sing Graceland, which opens with the lyric, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." I'm not going to elaborate anymore, just going off onto a tangent now. But by the way, that song Graceland is about the mansion in the 4 times 4th state, speaking of 44 in Iran. Okay, now, May 23rd will be 53 days after March 31st. 53 hostages, by the way, in Operation Eagle Claw. But that was the day that King James, as in King Apollyon, his record of 1,229 wins or games in his career. So he broke the record that day. Okay, and which is amazing because the 39th president died on the date 12/29. The president that presided over Operation Eagle Claw, which was an attempt to extract 53 hostages, at 53 days after King James's record 12/29 win, is the day of the predicted destruction of the U.S. warship and the predicted mission to extract the nuclear dust being aborted. That's ultimately, I shouldn't have waited this long into the video to explain that. The destruction of the U.S. warship will result in the decision to abort the mission to extract the nuclear dust. Just like the destruction of the helicopters resulted in the decision to abort the mission to extract the hostages. The 4 times 4th prime number of hostages, with the 4 plus 4 helicopters lost and the 4 plus 4 deaths of military personnel, and the U.S. Abraham Lincoln is named after the 4 times 4th president. Here we have the president who was inaugurated in 77 and began this series of 7 presidents that parallel the 7 kings in Bible prophecy. Hence why King James's record of 12/29, hinting at the date on which the president that was inaugurated in 77 that began the 7 kings prophecy died on the date 12/29. But he was the 39th president. And okay, so you get the idea here. That's why the relevance of the 53 days from the King James record, because of the 53 hostages that the 39th president failed to extract. Now, so the King James record was 13 days. Let's see. Yeah, it was 13 days after the 18th of March, okay, when an Atlanta Hawk basketball player, did his long shot, the highlight of the day. He threw the ball, I forget how many feet away from the basket, but he did it at the buzzer like it was a long shot, and it went through the basket. It swished through the basket, causing the basket net to resemble the movement of a mushroom cloud. Yes, that's where all of this is going. The nuclear dust is a problem, and there's only one solution, and it is to nuke the regime. That's what's described with the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven. So anyway, the 13th days to the 18th of the month is prophetic because of Revelation 13:18. Which is about the mark of the Antichrist. Now, so anyway, that day was 8 days, or 4 plus 4 days, after Bam did his record number of points in a game to beat Bryant. Okay, on the date 310, number 13 passed number 8's record. As in 138, Donald Trump, simple English gematria. Now, the Bonhomme Richard caught on fire on July 12, 2020. The USS Bonhomme Richard was a smallish aircraft carrier, and the predicted destruction of the aircraft carriers on May 23rd will be 70 months and 11 days after the USS Bonhomme Richard fire in San Diego. San Diego is where the USS Abraham Lincoln is stationed. Just came to me just now. 70 months and 11 days because Genesis 7:11 is the verse which the flood judgment began. Obviously that connects because this is the beginning of the judgment for America, the destruction of these warships. Now the ship was designed for deploying a Marine Corps amphibious invasion, which is what's coming in Iran. The path of the eclipse entered the U.S. over the Mexican border over Eagle Pass, Texas, exactly 404 days before the Mexican warship named Descending Eagle struck the Brooklyn Bridge. That's amazing. We already talked about this Mexican warship sign. Now the Brooklyn Bridge gives us BB, and Brooklyn is where the largest population of Jews live in America, and Bibi Netanyahu is Jewish, the leader of Israel. 404 days is also 110% of a year. When the Mexican warship crashed into the bridge, the 110th mayor spoke at the bridge. Of course, on 9/11, there was 110 stories that collapsed. The mayor spoke at 9 p.m. That's right. It was a sign pointing back to the warning of judgment on 9/11. 404 days is 101 times 4 days. There were 101 passengers on the Mayflower ship, which was also sung about by Paul Simon in his song American Tune. Paul Simon sings about the Mayflower ship and the Apollo 11 ship. And he contrasts these two in the beautiful lyrics of the song. Okay, but anyway, 101 times 4 hints at the date of the beginning of the hostage crisis. November 4th. The beginning of the 444-day hostage crisis began on this date, 11/4, which in itself hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. Also, the Antichrist 44th president was elected on the date 11/4 in the year 04 plus 04. That date of the election was 9 plus 10 plus 10, which hints at 9/11, exact years after the beginning of the Iran hostage crisis, the 444-day hostage crisis, which led to the attempt to extract the 4 times 4th prime number of hostages. 404 days is also 1 year, 1 month, and 9 days, which hints at Revelation 9:11. Which is about demons from the bottomless pit over a bridge. The bridge from the demonic realm into the earthly realm. On the day of the eclipse was the first Nike commercial with the Aliens logo. A basketball player named Wembanyama, which hints at the basketball player Obama, who is known by the nickname the Alien because aliens are demons pretending to be aliens. And the Brooklyn Bridge is a bridge near where the events of 9/11 occurred, Lower Manhattan. At 9 p.m., the 110th mayor spoke about the ship that crashed into the bridge. At 9 p.m., it was stated that 1 plus 1 people had died. A second witness confirmation to the fact that this is a 9/11 warning. a warning regarding the destruction of America on 9/11 and 2001 that will now get underway, beginning symbolically with this destruction of the ships. As in the warship on which that crashed into the bridge near the events of 9/11 that killed 1+1 people, in which the 110th mayor, as in 11, spoke at 9 p.m. 1+1 people hints at 11. The descending Eagle ship, again, that's the name of the ship, crashed into the BB, as in Bibi Netanyahu, exactly the 4 times 4th prime number of weeks, as in the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven, before it is predicted that a U.S. warship will be destroyed in the Iran war. And again, 4 times 4 prime number of hostages were in Iran during Operation Eagle Claw, in which they were attempted to be extracted using ships in the form of helicopters, which are ships. That's amazing, though, right? And again, Kobe Bryant, who was charged for rape in Eagle Claw, or rather Eagle, Colorado, died in a helicopter crash. He was number 4+4. 4+4 military personnel died in the helicopter crashes in Operation Eagle Claw. And anyway, yeah, the descending Eagle ship crashed into the bridge exactly the 4 times 4th prime number of weeks before the predicted destruction of the U.S. warships. Amazing. And it's Iran, which will be destroyed by the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven. So, the aircraft carrier named after the 4 times 4th president is in the Persian Gulf. Lincoln died exactly 47 years after the Titanic sank. This is when it was first realized that the USS Abraham Lincoln will be sunk. Abraham Lincoln died on April 15th, 1865, 47 years before the Titanic sank on April 15th, 1912, which was exactly 110 years, speaking of the 110th mayor, etc., before the Moskva sank, the 110 floors that collapsed on 9/11, right? On April 14th, 2022, which is exactly 1,500 days before the predicted sinking of the USS Abraham Lincoln. So from the death, and that's relevant because the 15th prime number is 47, which hints at Iran and the regime that's been in power for 47 years and the 47th president. So from the death of the president Abraham Lincoln, we have this stunning, clear, profound series of connections leading to the predicted sinking of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Stunning. Now, Lincoln was shot. The USS Lincoln will be shot at with a missile. Because this is more confirmation. Lincoln was replaced by Ulysses S. Grant. In fact, no kidding. It's not only Ulysses, because Ulysses is in itself a USS, right? So Abraham Lincoln was replaced by Ulysses, but I think his middle initial is, of course it is. So it's the U.S. Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. It couldn't be more clear. Ulysses S. Grant replaced Abraham Lincoln. The USS Abraham Lincoln, in other words, will be shot. Yeah, that's quite something, these connections here. Now, May 23rd, ships will be destroyed, predicted 802 days before the date 8/2 in the year 28, when it is predicted that the ship the airplane carrying Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, the predicted running mates in the election, will crash. $802 is also the 9 times 27th semi-prime number, and that hints at Daniel 9:27, the verse in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the end times period of the Antichrist, who will become the president again as a result of the crash of these Democrat politicians. Barack Obama and Michelle Obama will, in an emergency, replace these two as their candidates, as the Democrat Party candidates. Three and 1/4, 3.25, hints at 3.14, right? 3 and 1/4, 3 and 1 over 4, hints at 3.14. Okay? So 13 divided by 4, 3 and 1/4. What am I getting at here? Well, anyway, on the date 413, which is 13-4 outside the US, hints at pi, right? Because 413, if you take that number and you flip the 4 and you flip the 3, they look like a P and a E. So 413 hints at pi, but pi is also 3.14, all right? So now the point for going here, by the way, on the date 413 is when the U.S. blockade of the Iranian ports began, which is why God pointed to the date 413 ahead of time, but I'm at a loss as to why I included that right here. Anyway, the ship on the predicted destruction of ships on, no, wait a second, sorry, the Mexican ship that crashed into the bridge on May 17th, 2025, that killed 1+1 deaths and was announced at 9 p.m., was exactly 9 months before February 17th this year, and the Black Swan signs. Okay, which was the death of Jesse Jackson, who was the Black Swan president, who changed unexpectedly, that's what a Black Swan event is, American politics. And it was the sudden unexpected avalanche, the 4th deadliest in U.S. history, that killed people in an expedition, a skiing expedition led by 4 guides near the I-40+40. On the same day as the unexpected sudden brownout dust storm that caused zero visibility and a car pileup in Colorado that killed 4 people. Colorado is the 4 corners state that has 4 corners. So there was a lot of 44s. There was a Black Swan. Okay, that pairs with the 9 months, because I said, like I said earlier, 9 and 44 are paired together to confirm the signs and connections. And this date, in turn, February 17th, is 13 weeks and 4 days to May 23rd and the predicted unexpected, shocking event that will be the sinking of the USS aircraft carriers. One of them named after the 4x4th president, which is why the connections to the Black Swan signs involving 44. Again, the flood judgment began on the date 2/17. The avalanche and the car pileup in Colorado were exactly 444 plus 444 plus 444 days after the Colorado Avalanche hockey team won the Stanley Cup. and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its meaning. And 444 obviously hints at the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which hints at Iran. Okay, so the 44s, and by the way, Jesse Jackson died in his 80s, which is 40 plus 40, and it was the same day that the 80s coach of the Colorado NBA basketball team died, and he also died in his 80s, 40 plus 40, and he died on the day of the 4 deaths in the Colorado car pileup. Same day, February 17th, okay? Now, this date, with its 44s, is 5 plus 4 days to February 8th. Or, no, after February 8th. 5 plus 4 days after February 8th. Okay, so why is that relevant? Well, in between the 2 dates is February 13th. 5 days and 4 days between these 2 dates, okay? So what happened on February 13th? It was another Black Swan event. The figure skater, dressed in an elegant all-black outfit, like a black swan, figure skating, hinted at ballet and the movie Black Swan. Anyway, he was ahead by 5 points. He was the overwhelming favorite who had dominated the figure skating world. His nickname is Quad God, quad being 4, and he was the 4-time US champion, which obviously confirms the connection to the 44s 4 days later after he fell. But he was, so that was the Black Swan. He fell and ended up in 4 plus 4th place. Okay, and instead of first, but he was, before that final skate of the event, ahead of his competition by 5 points, which is why the 5 days connection here too. Okay, now, so that gets us to February 8th. Why does February 8th connect? And that was a Black Swan event. Again, we were predicting the Black Swan unexpected sinking of the U.S. carriers. Now, on February 8th, at the same Olympics, Lindsey Vonn crashed and then was rescued by a helicopter, as in the helicopters in Operation Eagle Claw, for example. Now, she crashed 13.4 seconds into her run. She was wearing number 13. She crashed into the 4th gate of the run. It was her 4th Olympics, and she is the 13th prime number of years old. See a pattern here? This was the same day as the Super Bowl, in which the Seahawks were playing in their 4th Super Bowl, and they beat the Patriots by limiting them to 13 points. They won by 4 times 4 points. What's going on here? Well, the number 13 symbolizes America, Patriots, 13 colonies, right? But also Iran. The Jews were persecuted on the 2 13th days of the month in the Bible. The destruction of Iran will come by the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven, which is why the Seahawks won by 4 times 4 points. The Seahawks hints at a Sea Eagle ship, as in Operation Eagle Claw helicopter ships, as in Kobe Bryant, charged with rape in Eagle, Colorado, as in the Eagle has landed, moon dust, nuclear dust, as in the ships at sea, the Seahawks. The Super Bowl was a prophetic sign that is pointing to the destruction of the USS carriers' warships in the Iran war. That's why they beat the Patriots. That's why the Patriots lost with 13 points. The founding of America, but also Iran. The Seahawks. Eagle being Iran, as of everything that I've explained, right? Furthermore, the eagle is the symbol of America's power, which will be destroyed on this predicted date. Now, the pattern of the 13 and 4 ultimately pointed to what I described here, the date 4/13, which was symbolic in the escalation of the war. That was the day that Trump began the blockade of the Iranian ports. A significant development that God pointed to ahead of time through, for example, Lindsey Vonn. The Queen of Downhill is her nickname, or the Queen of Cortina, which is the name of the mountain she crashed on. But that hints at Queen Esther in the Bible, which is where we get the Jews persecuted on the 2 13th days of the month, which is why Queen of Downhill was wearing number 13. But again, this also serves to confirm the 13 weeks and 4 days, because again, Lindsey Vonn and her crash 13.4 seconds into her run connects to the black swan signs on February 17th, through the other black swan when this figure skater crashed, and February 17th and the 44s and the black swan avalanche and everything connect with 13 weeks and 4 days to the predicted black swan, shocking, unexpected sinking of the USS warships, the Seahawks. You see here? Hopefully I've explained this now and that it makes sense. It's truly stunning. And that's what I just said was elaborated. What it is elaborated on is in this sentence right here. Right? February 8th, the Super Bowl, the 13s and 4s connects to February 17th, as I explained in the Black Swan events, which is 13 weeks and 4 days to the warship, the predicted Black Swan sinking of the warships. In other words, the Seahawks over Patriots Super Bowl is pointing to the coming destruction of a U.S. warship at sea. Oh, and swan is a bird. Seahawks, black swan. Oh, and by the way, this Super Bowl between the Seahawks and the Patriots was a rematch of the Black Swan Super Bowl, which ended with a shocking, unexpected event at the end of the game, which was an interception of a dart, a pass by the quarterback, number 3, and the Super Bowl that was just played was played by the Seahawks Super Bowl. Okay, hold on. So anyway, the interception was in the end zone. It ended the game. The Patriots won. Okay, that was symbolic of a missile being shot at a U.S. warship, Patriots. Right? Interception is like a missile shot. Right? Now he was quarterback number 3 in that Super Bowl, and that was the Black Swan Super Bowl, because that Super Bowl will always be remembered by this shocking, unexpected event at the end of the game, which shouldn't have happened. Okay, the Seahawks should have given the ball to their running back to run it easily into the end zone. And that running back's name is the Beast, because the Antichrist is referred to as the Beast in Bible prophecy. Okay? Now, anyway, this rematch, the quarterback's number was 14. So, number 3 and 14. More confirmation of this 3-14 or 13-4 pattern. And they're interchangeable. If you think that they aren't, if you thought about that for a second, they are interchangeable because 4:13 hints at pi, but 3 and 14 hints at pi, right? Because 3.14 is pi, and the number 114, when we reverse the numbers, gets us the letters PIE. All right. Now, the reason why February 17th, Black Swan, is important is that on this day, the Ayatollah Khomeini threatened to sink a U.S. warship. That's right. If you thought this was all contrived, before the prediction comes to pass, because obviously when the prediction comes to pass, it'll obviously prove that none of this is contrived. But if you thought that before the prediction, the 44s hinting at Iran and the 4 winds from 4 quarters of heaven and all that, and the Black Swan sinking of the ships, well, the reason for all of that on February 17th is it is also the day that the cleric dressed in all black garb, Khomeini, threatened to sink the U.S. warship. It's like the Iranian regime knows something here. They have the ability to sink the warships. They're not going to let them know, though. And for some reason, so the definition of a Black Swan event is an unexpected event that in hindsight can be easily explained and could have been foreseen. I don't know why it is thought that the U.S., rather the USS, or rather the aircraft carriers are unsinkable. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the people that work in the Pentagon are way smarter than me and understand this problem, you know? But God is communicating that they'll be sunk. How can Iran sink them? Is it just like hubris? Is it just really just pride that is preventing the obvious from being understood, which is that Iran would be able to sink a USS, I keep calling it USS, that Iran would be able to sink an aircraft carrier? Now, so if Iran's black-robed cleric on 217 equals 13, because 13 equals Iran, and we pair it with the Black Swan 4s on 217, the same day, we confirm the 13 weeks and 4 days to May 23rd. That's the even easier way to confirm all of this. We had the patterns of the 13s and 4s, right? But also, Iran is 13. And the leader of Iran called for the sinking of the ship on this date, which on that same day was the 4s, the 4th deadliest avalanche, for example. And that gives us 13 and 4. And that date is 13 weeks and 4 days to the predicted sinking of the Black Swan sinking of the ship. Stunning. All right, I can see the finish line here. All right. So anyway, let's finish this up. It was 11 clients and 4 guides in the skiing excursion. 11/4 was the date the 444-day Iran hostage crisis began. 4 guides, 4th deadliest avalanche, 4 deaths in the car pileup, in the Four Corners state with four corners, and the closure of the I-40 plus 40, which is where the avalanche occurred. At the time of the avalanche, the I-40 plus 40 was closed, which is prophetic also, because that's in Truckee, California, and this was on the anniversary of the climax of the Canadian truckers' protest. But that's another subject, another video that I've already made, actually. So, all right, now, so yeah, 11 clients, 4 guides. That's more Iran for you because of the beginning of the war with Iran that began way back on the date 11/4 in 1979. Okay, I've been focused on this for a couple of hours. How to confirm 13 weeks and 4 days. I just did confirm it because Iran equals 13 and the cleric of Iran, okay, but we have more. I forgot about this. It was 13 people who were buried in the snow. In the avalanche, 13 people were buried. It was 4 plus 4 deaths. By the way, that was another 44. I forgot. 4 plus 4 deaths, but 13 people were buried in the 4th deadliest avalanche. That's 13 weeks and 4 days. Amazing. 13 buried, 4 guides, 4th deadliest avalanche, 4 deaths in the car pileup, 13 weeks and 4 days to May 23rd, and the predicted black swan sinking of the U.S. warships. Amazing. And 217, this date of the avalanche, and the cleric, or Khomeini, threatening to sink a warship, was 9 months exactly after the 1 plus 1 deaths, which since at 9/11, on the warship in Lower Manhattan, where 9/11 occurred. 413 is relevant to Iran, as 413 is the 130th semi-prime number. I forgot about that. That's also why Iran's ports were blockaded on the date 413, because 413 is the 130th semi-prime number, a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, which God uses, and 130 is equal to, in Hebrew gematria, the word Iran, which is another reason in how 13 symbolizes Iran, incidentally. Now, the date 413 is also 4 months and 13 days to the date it is predicted that Iran will nuke the Islamic regime in Tehran. Israel will have no choice but to do so after the mission to extract the nuclear dust is aborted. One, as I said, it is not possible to understand the conflict without a spiritual perspective. The nation of Iran is ruled by Satan. Islam is from Satan. The radicals in Islam, and so let's distinguish radicals from non-radical Muslims. Non-radical Muslims are like Catholics. The vast majority of Catholics do not know anything about the Bible or very little. They're just Catholic by tradition. It's a superstition for them. They're not really Catholic or even Christian, right? It's the same with the majority of Muslims, quote unquote, Muslims, right? It's just, for them, it's tradition, it's part of their tribal affiliation with other Muslims, right? But anyway, the real Muslims, the regime, to call them radicals isn't really fair because it's just following Islam. So Islam is evil, and it is from Satan. It is satanic, Anyway, Satan's, in the Bible, a name for Satan is the Prince of Persia in Daniel chapter 10. It goes back long before modern Iran. Anyway, Satan will not stop. His job is to destroy Israel, the apple of God's eye. According to the Bible. And God is in the process of restoring Israel in the last 100 years to bring about this end times period in which the world will gang up on Israel prior to the second coming of Christ to Israel, in order to dwell in Israel on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of peace on earth, when the entire world will recognize the truth about the God of the Bible. But it is God's prerogative to veil that truth and to have revealed that truth progressively throughout history. And that's what the Bible is. It's a history book, unlike the Quran or any other religion. Either the events happened in the Bible or they didn't. Muhammad could have had his vision in the cave, or Buddha his enlightenment under the tree in any other time period. It would make no difference to the religion, unlike Christianity and Judaism, where either things happened or they didn't. Anyway, God has been, and so the unveiling will happen at the second coming. The book of Revelation, the word revelation comes from apocalypse in Greek, which means the unveiling. The end of the book of Revelation is the unveiling and the arrival of Christ in his second coming. But Satan's plan, his agenda, is to prevent that, and the way to prevent that is to prevent the restoration of Israel. So that's why the irrational hatred of Jews and Israel. And it's spiritual. It can only be understood, this irrationality, just like the Trump derangement syndrome, can only be understood, this irrationality can only be understood from a spiritual perspective. And it's satanic. It's rebellion against God. And so the regime will not stop ever in its attempt to get a nuclear bomb. That's what the regime exists for. The only way to prevent the regime from getting a nuclear bomb is to destroy the regime. Ultimately, I mean, if just hypothetically, the US were able to extract the nuclear dust and there were no more nuclear dust, okay, the regime would still not stop at its attempt to get a nuclear bomb. It might restart the enrichment process again, or it could maybe do other things like import a nuclear bomb from North Korea or whatever. But the regime exists in this whole end times drama plan to get the nuclear bomb, and the whole plan includes, for example, the Strait of Hormuz, like I explained earlier, but it includes also this aborted mission, which will lead to Israel having no choice but to destroy the regime in Tehran before it destroys Israel. And the only way to destroy the regime in Iran is to nuke it. You might say, well, what about the thousands of lives that aren't with the regime? It's the same thing with Gaza. The terrorists use civilians as their shield. Gaza is like a miniature Tehran. The regime is hiding amongst the civilians that aren't with it. But my response to the question, well, what about that, is to ask in return the question, what is the meaning of life? And you first need to answer that question. And if you don't have that question properly and truthfully answered, you will not be able to understand God and his ways properly. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.